Presentation or that introduction and handling the names beautifully. So what is life care planning all about? Generally, I think sometimes the easier way to answer that question is to actually talk about the questions that people come to us with. Um, I'm going to answer the questions actually with more of a question. So when you find yourself asking, um, are you or your family members struggling to meet the needs of an elderly loved one during a chronic illness or disability? Is the primary caregiver suffering from burnout, ill health, frustration, guilt, or confusion? Are family members confused about care options, what to do next, or where to get help? Was the elder recently diagnosed with cancer, Alzheimer's disease, or other chronic conditions? Is the elder ill or disabled? With children who live out of town, has the elder experienced a catastrophic event, such as a fall, medication mistake, or an accident of some type? Have the family members discovered the elder wandering, malnourished, dehydrated, or unable to provide self-care? Has the elder suffered a medical event, such as a stroke or a heart attack? Are elders expressing worries about paying for long-term care in the future? Are children voicing concerns about a parent's debilitating diagnosis? Is the elder hospitalized and the family has been told that returning home is not an option? So if you see one of these signs of distress, your family may benefit from a life care plan. A life care plan describes how our team will meet the elder's medical, long-term care, legal, and emotional needs during long-term illness or incapacity until the end of life. The benefits to the family include freedom from the burdens of caregiving, relief from anxiety about paying for care, guidance with every legal, healthcare, and long-term care decision for the rest of the elder's life, confidence that comes from having a plan for ongoing care as the elder's condition progresses, security because the spouse and dependents are provided for, and peace of mind because the right to quality of care is protected. The benefits to the elder include obtaining the right care sooner, preservation of independence for as long as possible, and the ability to age with dignity and the security of knowing that you have an advocate dedicated to maximizing your quality of life. Life care planning shows the average consumer, and this is essentially what this diagram illustrates, is how to maximize their resources to pay for care. We set goals, we obtain the financial and health information, and we have the expertise to know how to apply those funds to help the senior maintain independence and choice. Next slide, please. So this slide illustrates that sort of the retirement planning. So in retirement planning, we're focusing on having the resources available to meet our retirement lifestyle goals. And then estate planning, well, we're dealing with the transfer of authority and the decision-making responsibilities and the transfer of assets. But when we're looking at both of these plans, neither deal with something you didn't plan for. Life care planning is a specialty within elder law, emerging around the country that takes a holistic view of every aspect of caring for someone with a chronic illness. While traditional elder law or Medicaid planning law firms focus on saving the elders money for the next generation, which we do also, life care planning firms, which is what we are, if necessary, we use the elder's money to maximize his or her quality of life and independence. In essence, the life care planning helps people find and pay for good care for life by bundling Medicaid asset protection, Medicaid benefits qualification, Social Security disability income qualification, long-term care services coordination, and nursing home advocacy and crisis intervention. The life care plan will help you answer your questions about your long-term care and benefits care choices, such as what is healthcare, chronic care, and long-term care services are available to me? How can I get the good care I need and deserve? Whether I'm in my home, whether I'm in an assisted living facility, in my child's home, or in a nursing home. How will financial and healthcare decisions be made for me if I cannot make them for myself? Who can I rely on to make sure that decisions to be made are the right ones? If I can't take care of myself, who will make sure my spouse continues to have a good quality of life? If there is a healthcare crisis, what will we have to do? Where do we turn to for the help that we need? How do I know I'm getting good care? Who will advocate and intervene for me if necessary to ensure my right to quality health care and long-term care? And again, what public benefits am I entitled to, and what do I have to do to qualify for them? Should I rely on Medicaid or other governmental benefits to help me pay for my care? How do I apply for benefits? Do I have to spend all of my money on my care, whether in my house or in a nursing home? How can I protect my assets to care for my spouse to ensure that I receive quality care or to leave any money to my grandchildren? How do I provide for family members with special needs? So these are all the types of questions that go into the process of developing a life care plan that's specific to your particular situation. Next slide, please. So in this process, what we're looking at is we use the elder care continuum in this process. And the certain principles within this, as you can see, there's certain along the left side, we have health and the ability to function, our home sweet home, our cost of care. And then we talk about public benefits and available resources. And you can see that a lot of times it really kind of depends on where you fit within this continuum and what your options are going to be. When we discuss life care planning, we talk about the elder care continuum, which is, as you can see, it's a timeline in which the individual is moving forward toward the end of their life. The ideal for all of us is to age in place. That means the elder who lives in their own home, independently and successfully with no assistance needed until they pass away. Some people have the good fortune to depart life in this manner, but many do not. Instead, they may have Alzheimer's or Parkinson's disease, or suffered a disabling stroke or become frail, or otherwise have found themselves moving down the elder care continuum. They find that they need assistance with activities of daily living. That means they need to plan for their long-term care needs. And what does life care planning mean? Again, I describe life care planning as our discovering the elder's place on the elder care continuum and then figuring out what we need to do to identify, access, and pay for good care for the individual, both now and in the future. And it's not as easy as it sounds, but for an elder-centered law practice, it is the essence of what we do. To put it another way, we help older people manage their chronic illnesses. Seniors need to get good care when and where they need it, and they need to know how to pay for it. So next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about the foundation of how we begin this process. So of course, we all need to talk about estate planning. And as I said, there's the estate planning that you can put them all up, Chris. So we're going to talk about these things. We're going to talk about a will, a trust, our healthcare directives, our powers of attorney, and then the reasons for why we do some of these. We're also going to talk about beneficiary forms and how important those are. And we also need to consider life insurance. We need to understand estate taxes. We need to talk about funeral expenses and making final arrangements. And in some situations, people have businesses, and that's something that needs to be talked about. And then, of course, making sure that we have the documents stored somewhere so that people have access to them. Because obviously, if we've done the documents, we want to make sure that people have access to them. So having the proper estate planning documents can save you and your heirs significant time and money. Even so, most people do not have these documents in place, unfortunately. I often tell my clients, estate planning is actually a gift that we do, or a gift that we give to our kids. Because if anybody has been on the other side of that, they know how burdensome sometimes that can be. So especially, without a plan. So why? Many people don't want to spend the money, and others use the "I don't have time" excuse. I recently read a troubling study, actually, by www.care.com on the number of Americans who do not have their estate plans in order. And it was overwhelming that the estate planning is actually becoming less prevalent overall. and that the number of adult Americans that have a will or another type of estate planning document actually decreased by nearly 25% since 2017, and that only 32% of the people surveyed said they had a will, trust, or other estate planning document. And older adults are even less likely to have a will. The number of older and middle-aged adults with estate planning documents dropped by 20 to 25% since 2019, respectively. And again, the reasons given for people why they don't have a will, 36% said they just haven't gotten around to doing it. So what's a bit troubling is that the percentage of people who think estate planning is important dropped from over 70% to under 60% over the last 2 years. So why are estate planning documents vitally important? If you die without a will, the laws of your state will dictate who gets your property. Since virtually no one knows how the state will divide the property, this is not something that should be left to chance. Minor children are the most important reason to have a will. If parents are in an accident, for example, like a car accident where both die, there's no will, the likelihood of a custody battle for one child between the spouses' families is extremely high. If you have minor children or know someone who does, make sure they have a will and deal with the custody of their children. Let's talk a little bit about trusts, also known as living trust or revocable trust. If parents are in, trusts are typically used to hold assets after death, where they can be distributed over time, versus a will, where assets are given at death. In other words, I get a lot of times I get clients that'll come to me and say, I need a will. And I said, yeah, a will's important, but a will's only going to come into being when you die. And that's a really important distinction to remember. Many times people will give a portion of their estate to their children at certain ages, like 25% at age 40, 25% at age 50. So in other words, a trust gives you those options that you can structure the distribution out to your children. If your children have special needs, you can take care of that situation. But the main reason to use trust is to make sure your assets are not probated upon death. When assets are probated, that means the distribution of the assets is supervised by a court of law. And anytime you involve the court, things can get expensive and potentially messy. And if assets are owned at your death, owned by a trust, at your death, they'll pass to the heirs in an unsupervised manner. So if you have a trust, the other thing, and this is where the other important thing that's to remember is that we want to make sure once we've done the trust and executed that we've funded it. And that goes along with the same principle about filing beneficiary forms. We want to make sure that our beneficiary forms coordinate with either our trust distributions, either a part of the trust, or if they're not going to be a part of the trust in this situation of where we have maybe retirement assets where we want to keep them in that particular vehicle, but we want to make sure that those beneficiary forms have been checked and to make sure that they are where we want, that they're going to where we want to go. The other important documents we want to talk about are the powers of attorney for property and healthcare. The property ones are going to put someone in place that will help us, somebody to step in our situation if we can't monitor or we can't take care of our own assets. And of course, the healthcare one is the one that will put a person in place to help us make healthcare decisions. Next slide, please. So I have a trust. Do I still need a will? I get that question a lot of times too. Well, yes, you do. Again, the living trust can never include everything you own. Generally, as I said, a particular situation or example of that is if we have particular retirement assets, we may not want to fund them in the trust. We would want to name them to an individual beneficiaries. And again, a will does not will not do things that a trust can do. As I explained in some of the special needs situation, we can be very specific about how we want the assets to go. We can keep things in trust so that the ultimate distribution can be done over time. We can put certain conditions on that ultimate distribution. Next slide, please. As I said, what a will won't do, it isn't the place to handle certain kinds of property. It will not have funeral instructions in there. It will not reduce estate taxes. It will not avoid probate. Again, we cannot put certain conditions on our gifts. We cannot leave money for an illegal purpose. When I put that there, most people think that what I'm talking about is, say we have somebody that maybe has a gambling affliction or has a substance abuse. That's what that's referring to. And then again, if we have children with special needs, and then again, leaving money to pets, you can't do that in a will. Next slide, please. So again, as a summary, the key documents, we want to have a durable power of attorney for finance. We want to have a will we trust. We want to make sure our beneficiary designations are properly filled out. And our healthcare directives, we want to make sure that we've named an agent that will advocate for us and advocate for our end of life wishes. And the living will is a document that works as evidence of what our wishes will be, and that is used as a sort of evidence to our agent. And so with that, I think we will hand it over to Keith, and he will.
Before we do that, let me just circle back to the just a few kind of opening slides here. We kind of got pushed back that, so I'm going to back us up here and just take us back a couple slides here, because I think it's important for us to go through this, what really our group is all about. So we're the National Aging in Place Council. This is a group that was formed to really look at the aging population in this country. And so our group is the Chicagoland chapter. This is probably about, I think we're about a little bit over a year old, our chapter is. And the mission is for this group really is to educate and empower families in the Chicagoland area. And certainly we'll go outside the Chicagoland area so that people can really safely and independently age in their home. Most of us want to stay in our home as long as possible. Mary Kay talked about that, some of the issues that go on with that, but sometimes we can't. But this aging population that we have, which is more and more baby boomers coming along, we're finding that there's a lot of issues that are out there. So this group of licensed professionals, business owners, advocates got together, and we want to provide outreach to the different communities on a whole host of different topics. And so what we try to do is work together collaboratively. So learning from each other. On these sessions, I learn every time someone talks about the different issues. We all learn about what other avenues are out there for our clients that we touch every single day, as to what information and resources we can provide to them. So there's about 16 chapters in the United States that's growing. We've got about 30 members in our particular group. And so here's our problem that we have is by 2035, it's estimated that there'll be more people over the age of 65 than of age 18. So we can see on this chart here how the percentage of population of adults over age 65 is going to continue to grow. And it's also estimated that by the year 2050, that the population of over age 85 will be 19 million, up from about 7 million this year. So that's pretty significant when you look at the amount of people who are going to need the different services that are out there. And so what does aging in place mean? Well, like I said, it's a term to describe a person living in their home as their choice for as long as possible. So what this entails, though, a number of different components to a plan. So Mary Kay talked about one piece of that, the legal aspect of it, but there's also a lot of other things such as housing. How are you going to stay in your home? What needs to be done to this home to make sure that it's safe for you? There's also health and medical issues that have to be addressed as we age. A long-term care insurance is something that also is out there, which I think Keith is going to talk a little bit about. And then the financial aspect of it. How are we going to afford all this? How are we going to, what are we going to do with our funds that we've saved all our life? How are we going to spend them? And Terry's going to talk a little bit about some ways you can use those assets that you have. The other thing we have to look at is kind of some of the things that most of us never really look at, which is transportation and kind of like the infrastructure of what our communities are going to look like when we have 19 million 85-year-olds out in society. What are we going to have to do here over the next 20, 30 years to make sure that they have transportation, and those issues have to be addressed, as long as the community and social issues that are out there too. People are going to have hobbies, they're going to have interests, they're going to want to go out and do things in the community. And so we want to be a part of that, kind of that master plan, to be able to provide all these different services that are going to be needed. So as our organization grows, we want to make sure that we're outreaching to the community and providing those different services. So that's kind of a high-level overview of what we've got going here as far as the program. So let me just kind of skip through this again. Sorry for this. You've seen that once. And now I will turn it over to Keith. Thank you.
Okay. So when we talk with clients, often their biggest fear is actually running out of money, even greater than premature death. And no one wants to become a burden. So as we put together our plans for clients on, how much is care going to cost and how do we make sure that we're planning appropriately, it makes sense to take a step back and look at how do we calculate what that cost of care going to be. So if you can move to the next slide, Chris. There was a study that was done by the Medicare and Medicaid services that broke down what is the cost of care over different ages for different genders as well. And as you can see, the cost of care for men, especially 85 plus, is as much as $9,800 a year. Women tend to live longer than men, and because of that life expectancy, their cost of care and their medical expenses outpaces men. They're going to live longer, likely. They'll also, because they live longer, they may have other chronic conditions that need treatment. So, unfortunately, that's one of the downsides of living longer, is that you may become frail and need additional care. So let's talk about what does it mean on a daily basis or on a monthly basis for most families. So Chris, next slide. There we go. When we're looking at planning, it seems like small amounts initially, but when we put it together, it actually comes out to be quite a bit over time. Here's what a typical Medicare budget might look like today, considering premiums only. So we're not talking about co-payments or other insurance, but strictly the Part B premium, which is $144.60. We have the Medigap premium to cover the things that Medicare doesn't cover, which is about $200 a month. And the Part D drug premium, which is for prescriptions coverage, is about $40 a month. So you're looking at a monthly basis per person of almost $400, $384.60. If you've got a married couple, you're going to be closer to $740 on a monthly basis. When we extrapolate that out over a 20-year or 25-year time horizon, those numbers get pretty big. In fact, if we even just looking on an annual basis on our next slide, you'll see if we take those insurance premiums and spread that out over a year, that's actually $4,600 a year just in Medicare insurance premiums. Prescription drugs, things that are not covered by Medicare, $650. We've got dental and vision, which aren't covered by Medicare as well, when we add those in. And then the alternative care out of pocket for another $200. You're looking at $6,200 a year per person, potentially, for your healthcare costs. If you've got a couple, again, you're looking at $12,000 a year potentially. You expand that out over 20 years, you're looking at $240,000, $250,000 easily, not even taking into account future inflation as well. But let's take a look at what can affect what these costs are, because this is just an average client. And if we move to the next slide, then Chris, the things that could affect the cost of your healthcare and can increase your insurance premiums is, A, if you're making a little bit more money, because your insurance premiums for Medicare are pegged to, in a portion, to your income. But inflation and the possibility of getting sick down the road also are things that can increase your overall costs. As healthcare costs continue to rise, insurance premiums go up. It's costing more and more, especially as we look at what happened with COVID. There's so many more patients who need care, and the supply of nurses and healthcare agents, healthcare individuals is very limited. So the cost of care is being pushed up as partially, easy for me to say, as a result of COVID-19. And as we have more and more aging seniors that are requiring care and fewer people providing that care, we can expect those costs are going to go up just as a supply and demand function. Finally, the other thing is the change in healthcare status may require, as you get older, vision care, dental problems could pop up and require costs. Loss of hearing is something else that may require additional expenses to be paid. And most importantly, long-term care. So let's talk about long-term care briefly after the next slide. The next slide really just, again, extrapolates it out. If we look at 6,000 per person, 12,000 for a couple, over a 20-year, 25-year retirement, according to Fidelity, their numbers, they looked at $285,000 potentially in healthcare costs. When we look at EBRI, which is the Employee Benefits Research Institute, they found men is about 144,000, women at 163,000. The more money you earn, usually the greater your cost of care, because you're going to be finding specialists get more care. So when we look at planning for care, we try to start out with a goal of making sure we have money set aside to cover what could be at least on a minimum basis $250,000, but usually closer to $400,000 or $500,000, depending on what their assets are and what we can plan for. The next slide. Long-term care is something that we want to make sure we've addressed in our planning. And what is long-term care? Long-term care is the type of care that's required when you have a chronic condition that needs assistance over an extended period of time. Long-term care is not covered by Medicare or Medigap. They were never intended to do that. In fact, long-term care is something that comes on gradually. We'll talk about that in just a sec, but it could be as little as someone coming over to help with meals and shopping and a little bit of house care initially, to a long-term care could be living in a skilled nursing facility with 24-hour round-the-clock care. There's a continuum of care that as your needs change, we want to make sure are addressed. But the average period of skilled nursing care is only 28 days. Medicare will only cover the first 100 days potentially if there's a sign that you're you're improving and care is helping. Once we see that care is not, or once we see that you're not improving through the care plan that you have, it's possible that Medicare may say, we're going to stop paying for the services you're receiving. You'll have to pay for those out of pocket. Let's discuss the possibility of needing care over time. So 35% of people over 65 have some activity limitations. There was a study that was done by the MIT Massachusetts Institute of Technology. They have a longevity study that was done, and they came up with 3 questions that help determine the quality of retirement, your quality of your life in retirement. The first one is, who's going to change my light bulbs? Some of those things that we used to be able to do when we were younger, cleaning the gutters, mowing the lawn, shoveling the snow like we had this last weekend, become more and more dangerous to do as we age, and we're not quite as able to do that. The second question that determines the quality of life in retirement is, who am I going to have lunch with? You know, who's in your social network that you can, whether it be family, friends, and it's been much more difficult with COVID to have those one-on-one conversations in person. So we have to do things through Zoom occasionally. And finally, the last question that they decided on was, you know, how am I going to get my ice cream cone? What are those small pleasures in life that we have that we would miss if we weren't able to get that? Whether that be through shopping, you know, having groceries delivered, or, you know, getting out to a concert, getting to church or synagogue, your house of worship, maybe getting to the park, or seeing family and friends. If we lose that connection to those things that are most important to us, that's going to make it much more difficult for us to enjoy our life and to age safely in home. The first question, though, who's going to change my light bulb? Light bulbs is something that, you know, as we age over 65 and we have limitations, either remembering things, getting around, which is ambulatory, caring for yourself, or even living independently, paying bills, different things. We have, you know, 35%, so more than a third of people right now over 65 do need help with some of those things. And the causes of the activity limitations are those chronic diseases that many people have. In fact, the next slide will show over from 2013 to 2014 some of the key things that diseases that afflict those people over 65, with hypertension, heart disease, high blood pressure being, you know, first and foremost. Women are affected more by arthritis than men are. But men die earlier because they've got heart disease. They take on stress, and they don't have, in many cases, those social networks to help relieve stress. The older we live, the more and more of these both cognitive and chronic conditions may affect us, which makes our chance of needing care that much more likely. The next slide will show us, you know, those activities of daily living and the incidence of needing help with those as we move along. The activities of daily living, you think about, those are the first things you do every morning when you wake up: bathing and showering. It's getting dressed, eating, getting in and out of bed and moving to chairs, walking around, getting from room to room, and toileting as well, and relieving yourself. So as we age, as we become more frail, the need for those assistance with those things increases, not linearly, but um, at a much faster rate. So what type of care is available to individuals, and how does that continuum work out? Well, the first level of care is going to be in-home assistance. And this is not necessarily something you need a nurse for. It may be a companion to come in a couple times a day. These are instrumental activities of daily living, not the ones we just spoke about, but the things like shopping, preparing food, paying bills, dialing a phone and getting in touch with family, and potentially responding to emergency alerts. The next level of care is level 2, which is your activities of daily living. It's your custodial care, when you need to have someone there helping you with the eating and with the dressing, the changing and toileting. Sometimes when people are released from the hospital, they come home, they need custodial care to be there to help. Last year, my mother came home after a surgery, and she had to have custodial care because she was too weak for my dad to help her with her dressing and with her changing, and maintaining continence. So, you know, having care brought in to assist those family members, to allow you to stay in the community, to allow you to stay in the home, is important. Eventually, sometimes our care becomes too acute for us to receive that care in home, which is when we move to a skilled nursing care, where there's 24-hour supervision. That's when we need assistance with, it's ordered by a physician, but when we need assistance with our ongoing care, with monitoring of health vitals and disease management. Sometimes it's medications that can't be administered in a home. that need to be done around the clock. And if we don't have the assets available and we need to move to Medicaid, Medicaid is provided in skilled nursing facilities as well. Let's look at what the costs of these care are, because this is important. You know, we talked first about the cost of insurance. This is the actual cost of care if there is a long-term care event. The first would be for homemaker services, which are, you know, as little as you know, can be $140 a day. With home health aides, about $144 a day. Adult daycare is, you know, runs $75 a day, but in fact, many of the adult daycares are not able to take in seniors at this point just because of COVID. So when we move to an assisted living facility, when care is within a community and brought to you when it's needed, those tend to average about $4,000 a month is the median. And the most expensive type of care is that round-the-clock care at a skilled nursing facility, which is, you know, the median rate is $280 a day. 1 year at this rate, and you're spending more than $100,000. So it can take a big bite into your retirement savings if it's not planned for. So why do we want to plan for long-term care? Well, first of all, you know, we don't want to be a burden to our families. Okay, we want to make sure that we have control over the type of care that's brought in, and we know how it's going to be paid for. On the next slide, we'll talk about that, and being able to direct the type of care. Do you want care to be brought in home? Do you want your family members to be able to help out? Do you have family members as resources that you can tap if you need them? Or if we don't have them, you know, who can we bring in to help out with that? Ultimately, when we sit down and work with families who are looking to plan for a need for care over an extended period of time, we take a look at what are the assets that they have, what's their income that they have, what are their other expenses. We take a look at everything from all the different directions to see what's the best way to fund this care. One of the ways we're going to we look at one of the solutions to that, we're going to have Terry help us with, which is potentially looking at your home as an asset that can be used to assist with that. So with that, I'll hand it off to you, Terry, if that's okay.
Thanks, Keith.
Sure.
You guys have done a great job, that's for sure, telling us how much we need to plan legally, financially, for all the unexpected that's going to happen. As I work with my clients, I say, you know, I think we all sort of have the same goals, as Chris is going to show up here. I mean, we all want to live as long as we can, and we want to make our money last through our retirement. We want to maintain our lifestyle and, you know, be able to do the things we normally do, go out to restaurants, take care of our grandchildren, but we also want to afford that long-term care that we may need that Keith is talking about. So we need to have some sort of liquidity where we can have the cash for those types of expenses, as well as the unexpected expenses, whether it's, you know, medical bills, as we've talked about, or it's, you know, housing expenses or any type of unknowns that may come up. So as we do that, next slide, Chris. As we do that, we need to think about sort of, oh, and you might want a legacy, you might want to leave something for your children as well. And that is a very big goal for many of my clients. Thank you, Chris. So what are the options for trying to bring some liquidity into your life for these expenses that may come up as we get older? And, you know, one of the things we always talk about is the fact that your house is one of your biggest assets. Great if you were able to build a 401k or a pension or something as you were working, that was all in your accumulation stage. You paid off your mortgage. So now you have this house that's sitting there and it probably has a lot of that earnings and money that you accumulated over the life. And you need some way to access that as you're going into the distribution portion of your life and having to pay for things while you're not earning. So one thing you can do is sell your house. That's the obvious solution. For, I tell people, if you want to get the equity that's tied up in your house, just sell it, you know, and some people do opt to do that, move into a smaller home and downsize and get access to that cash. Or some people look at a home equity loan. whereby they go in and they borrow against their house, but that is often based on how much money they're making, their income, because they have to make payments on that home equity loan. Therefore, that becomes very limited for seniors who don't have the income that you did have before. So what we work with is called the HECM loan. And that's basically a home equity conversion mortgage loan. It's another name for what many people refer to as reverse mortgages. So I would like to take a few minutes just to explain what is the HECM loan, because I think people hear about it and then never really get any information on it. So a HECM loan is actually a government insured home loan. It comes from FHA. So it is something that you can feel comfortable with, that FHA is behind it. It is for anyone who's 62 and over. So it's specifically geared towards seniors. As I mentioned, it's commonly referred to as reverse mortgage loan, though, you know, they always want to use this acronym for everything the government does. So that's why they came up with HECM, but I always call it a reverse mortgage loan too. I want to just address, I know that, and the biggest component about a reverse mortgage is that you don't have to make any monthly mortgage payments. It's basically a way of borrowing money against your home and taking money out, just like you do when you get a loan, but you do not have to make payments on that loan. So everybody says, well, when do you pay it off? You pay it off when you no longer live in the home, which for most of my clients is when they passed away. So the intent is that you are aging in place, which is what we're talking about this evening, that you have a home that you want to stay in. So you know you're going to be there for the longevity of your life, or that's what your hope is. You take the cash out now while you have it available to you, and you spend it over time only to be paid back when you pass away or when you move into that assisted living. And that is when you then sell the home, or your heirs sell the home and pay off what you borrowed. So it's nice not having those monthly mortgage payments to worry about, and that it increases your income and your cash flow now while you're in the home. Go ahead, Chris, the next slide. So basically there's been a lot of misconceptions about reverse mortgages over the years. And we're very upfront about that. I think that it's one of these things where the government has really worked to make it a much more compliant loan over the last few years. There's been many, many changes, especially since 2015. So I would say if you haven't learned about it in the last 5 or 6 years, then you should take another look at it. I know many people believe the reverse mortgage, the bank takes your home. I mean, that's what many people tell me, and that's not the case at all. You stay on the title. It is your home. It is just a lien on your home, just like a regular mortgage that you may have had on your home for your life, over your lifetime. You never owe more than what your home is worth. That's the government insured part of it. They're the ones that will basically cover you and cover your heirs if you should end up living in the house so long that you have to, you owe more than what your home is worth at the time. So the whole intent is for you to be able to stay in your home while not making any payments, your monthly mortgage payments, like you would if you were to borrow against a home equity loan or a regular mortgage. Okay, thanks, Chris. It's very flexible. Basically, you set it up as a credit line. You can take money out as a lump sum. Some people do this, especially if they're paying off a current mortgage. If you have a house that's worth $200,000 and you still owe $50,000 on it, the first thing we'll do is we'll pay off your current mortgage, which eliminates that mortgage payment that you have currently. You may decide to get a certain amount per month. You may say, I need, and this is what I've been doing nonstop for the last 9 months for people who are doing home health care. They are saying, I need $6,000 for my mother's home health care. So we have set it up to do the reverse mortgage, and they will basically wire out, the $6,000 every month to be able to cover that cost. So it's one way to make sure and plan ahead, as Keith was saying, about, well, how are you going to be able to fund that healthcare cost that you have currently going on for your in-home care. There is a growing line of credit, meaning the amount of money that you've been given up front will actually get larger over time. That's one of the wonderful things about the reverse mortgage. It's called the growing line of credit. They give you an incentive to not take the money out if you don't need it. You set it up, and then the longer you keep it in there, the larger it will grow. Or it's very flexible. It can do a combination of anything. You say, I need, you know, 5,000 into my taxes now, but I want 5,000 every month going forward. Very much a flexible program. Thanks, Chris. So is there one more? Yeah. So the question I always get is, how much can I get? That all depends on several factors. The biggest factor is your age. If you think about it, the government's basically setting up money for you to take out. They're going to get paid back when you pass away or move out of the home. So the older you are, the more you're going to get. But it does start at 62. So there's a certain amount at 62, and then it grows. The amount you get will be much larger for my clients who are, and I've gone all the way up to 103 in terms of my clients. So, you know, the 103-year-old got like 90% of the value of her home, whereas the 62-year-old will get more like 50%. It also depends on what equity you have in the house, because like I said, the first thing they're going to do is pay off any mortgage you currently have. So if you do have a mortgage, we do have to pay off that current mortgage first, which some people do the reverse mortgage just to pay off that current mortgage to get rid of it. So that is something else that people use in terms of a strategy. And then also it depends, of course, on how much your home is worth, because that percentage I talked about before, you know, if you get 70% at your age, that 70% is 70% of the value of the home. So if you have a home that's worth 200,000 and you're getting 70% of it, your credit line will be 140,000. That sort of is just a general idea of how the numbers work. It does depend on interest rates, but right now interest rates are at lows, so it is the best you can get in terms of interest rates. So that's not something to think about right now. So anyway, I think that's it. Yes, Chris? I just want to say in general that, you know, NAIPC is an educational foundation. Our idea is we want to teach people. So this was just to sort of, you know, get you curious about reverse mortgages works. And we are all happy to help in terms of planning, you know, for your home health care costs, as Keith was saying, or your estate planning. And if you have any questions, just let us know. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Terry. I'll kind of close things out here, and we can maybe open it up for some questions if we have the ability to do that. So you see the group of people there. So we all come from different backgrounds and all have different experiences. So what we're trying to do as a group is to come together, like I said, and learn from each other so that we can be resources to our clients. So every one of our members, that's kind of their ultimate goal, is to be better for their clients, to be able to provide, you know, more services and be better at what we're doing with our particular profession. And this is a great quote from Phil, Dr. Phil, saying, you know, if you don't have a plan, it turns into weeks, months, years, et cetera. And then you look back and say, I should have had a plan. And there are certain things that you just, if something happens, you just can't go back on. And a lot of times we find the individuals who provide services to our clients end up going into these fires. I had it happen with my parents. My mother became ill. It became just an absolute fire. We got to find who can solve that problem. So what we want to try to do is, like I said, make sure we're out there understanding what's going on with clients and giving that information to you so that you can go ahead and plan for your future. Just one other thing here is that we do have another upcoming event next week. I was already mentioned on that, but it's going to be next Tuesday on transitioning to senior living. So I think you can find information for that on the library's website. And here's our information here. If you need some more details, certainly you can email the Chicagoland at Aging email there. And Gina Knight, who's actually on the program tonight, will be the one probably answering that email if you need additional information. Or if you have other groups that you belong to, you'd like us to show up on talking on a wide variety of things, from, you know, downsizing homes to financial to you know, healthcare, to all the issues you can think of, the social issues that come along with aging. We certainly would love the opportunity to be part of that outreach. So I think that's all I have for us tonight. I don't know who's going to take it from here.
I just wanted to mention one other thing. Thank you everyone for joining us. We're also going to provide Sadia with a list of all the members of the National Aging in Place Council here in the Chicagoland chapter, and she'll be able to share that information with you. As Chris said with the quote from Dr. Phil, you know, it's really about having a plan. So things like this list of professionals who can help you when something does take place or when you feel it's time, My suggestion is to put these things in a file so you know where to go when something does happen and you'll know who to reach out to for help. So